Hi, everybody. It is such a pleasure to be here on a lovely spring-like, summer-like day, here to stand up and take action for the Millennium Development Goals. So let's hear it and make some noise for the MDGs. Woo! Now, I'm here to stand up with my daughter, Stacia, who is just now, tomorrow, will be 16 weeks old. And I brought her not as a gimmick, although she is pretty cute if I have to say so myself, but because now I feel the goals so much more acutely. Now, in 2000, when world leaders came to the United Nations to say that we can be the first generation to end global poverty, they did so with an eye toward 2015 and an effort to make sure that all people had basic human rights, the basic human right to food, to livelihoods, to access to health care, clean water, sanitation, and empowering women, and making sure children were receiving a basic education, as I said. Now, here we are, 2010, and we're about 5 years left for the rest of the goals to be met. You've heard before our speakers say that progress has been uneven, but we have made some tremendous strides and achievements to the goals. What we need to do right now is to make sure that the last 5 years that we have to 2015, that our leaders keep their promises. Remember, these were promises that were made in all our names. And now why I feel that acutely, because here in the United States, when I was pregnant and I went to the hospital, I knew pretty much guaranteed that I was going to come out, both me and my daughter, and we were going to be healthy. In so many places around the world, that's just not the case. Upwards of 400,000 women die every year from pregnancy-related causes, and a lot of them are preventable if they have access to a skilled birth attendant. Some 5,000 children die every year from water diseases like diarrhea, and again, these are entirely preventable diseases. So what we need to do in these last 5 years is to make sure when world leaders come to the United Nations, they're already gathering right now, they'll be spending 3 days at the UN, to make sure that they intend to keep their promises. President Obama, for the Americans in the group, will be speaking on Wednesday. He has said that these goals are America's goals. We need to make sure that we can hold him to account, and we need to make sure that these goals are achieved. I am so glad to see everybody here participating in Stand Up. We've had some amazing events take place all around the world so far. We've had thousands and millions of people. Last year, we had 173 million people participate. We've got people banging drums and singing songs, even chanting and using those vuvuzelas in South Africa to make sure that we make a noise to hear those MDGs. So with that, thank you very much. And I know that when Stacia gets older, she will be living, hopefully, in a place where those MDGs have been achieved. Thank you very much.
This inspiring woman was the executive director of Oxfam Novi for nearly 10 years. She chaired International Women's Committee for a Just and Sustainable Peace in Israel and Palestine. She's co-chair of World Connectors and, among many other functions, co-chair of GCAP, the Global Call to Action Against Poverty. Please welcome Sylvia Borren.
Thank you very much. I want to do two things here. I want to introduce you to GCAP, the Global Call to Action Against Poverty, and I want to tell you what we want, the world we want, and I want to tell you that it's possible to get there. The Global Call to Action Against Poverty has in 5 years become the strongest, fastest growing global movement in the world. We are a combination of the women's movement, the environmentalist movement, the socially excluded, the migrants, the indigenous, youth and children, feminists, etc., etc. And because we are combining our forces at certain moments in the year and at certain advocacy events, we are able to put pressure on the governments and make a difference. In the 5 years, our yearly Stand Up and Take Action Against Poverty has not only meant that there have been millions of trees planted, slums cleaned up, schools built, and active things done on the ground, but governments have taken note. GCAP in India have been able to up the spending on education and health. GCAPs in Argentina and in South Africa has been able to get child benefits so girl children can stay at school. We've had a lot of examples of change on the ground, and we are convening the civil society here in New York to talk to the United Nations about the changes we want. In 4 years' time, we have gone to this amazing 173 million people who stood up with us last October, and in these 3 days all around the world, groups of citizens are standing up and making noise and demanding attention and demanding the end of poverty and demanding justice. Now, this year, as GCAP, we have worked on the concept, the world we want. And we have gone from the CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women, to the G8, to the G20, to the UN review on the Millennium Goals. We're here this weekend, and we will go on to the G20 in South Korea and to the climate event in Mexico at the end of this year. So we are constantly following our leaders to get them to keep their promises. Now, what is the world we want? What do we want? It really isn't very difficult, people. We want, as families, that we have clean water and sanitation and green energy, and we want to be protected against climate change. We want that the hungry are no longer hungry. 1 in 6 people go to bed hungry today, and there is enough food, and it's because of unequal distribution, and it's because there is food speculation going on. Other people are making profits over the lives of our people. We want women to, for goodness sake, have their reproductive rights and their maternal health. Come on. What are we talking about? 500,000 women dying every day for no reason. And we want women to get their education and to be part of every decision making at local, at national, and at global level. We have got not even hit the 20% mark of women in parliaments average in this world. That's what we want as women. Girl and boy children want quality education. Quality education of trained teachers that get them a future, that get them trained to do work and to get them literate and learn to have constructive relationships through life skill. Young men and women want to have decent work for decent pay and the rest of their life. Stop child labor, and have the decent work for decent pay. That's what we want. We want the workers of this world to be able to organize for good conditions, and we want the companies and the multinationals not to make their profits over the backs of their workers. And we Western countries should not import products with those kind of production situations. We want the voters of this world to actually be able to speak to politicians who are not living in an era of impunity, who can make promises and break them time and time again. We want our politicians to keep their word, to keep their promises. We want the socially excluded of this world, and watch this, the indigenous, the Dalits, the Romas, the migrants, not to be scapegoated because some politicians want to divide and rule and using them in order to increase their own popularity skills. We as citizens want peace. We want a stop of arms. We want a stop of all the conflict in the world. We want human rights. We want to be able to have space for voice and for diversity. And finally, on this planet, we want life. We are destroying our planet, and we are doing it consciously, and we're doing it by our consumerism in the Western world, and we must try and bring this planet into balance. It doesn't matter anymore whether you approach these problems from a point of view of gender or climate or equality or justice or minorities. It doesn't make any difference anymore. It's all the same problems, and the most amazing thing is we actually know the solutions. We know that we need green and inclusive economies on the ground. We know that we need the principle of do no harm, which goes for the Western government, sometimes the multinationals. We know we must have pay what you publish what you pay. We have to watch the European free trade agreements, who are screwing some of our African colleague countries. And we know that we can actually fix the situation together. And so the big question is, Why are we not doing it? Why are we not doing it? We, the citizens of the world, will get together with those people in governments and those people in companies who agree with us that we can make the connections and that we must move this world into a better balance. We do not want a culture of winner takes all. We are working towards a culture of justice for all. And I want to thank all the GCAP and all the social movements around the world who are keeping our governments accountable. We have to make ourselves, our governments, our companies accountable. And now I think I'm supposed to read a pledge. Is it up on the screen? We're going to read it together. And I'd like you all to read it with us. United Nations Millennium Campaign and GCAP together. Here we go, everybody. As world leaders prepare to meet at the UN next week to review progress on the Millennium Development Goals, we stand with millions of people around the world to show our commitment to the fight against poverty and inequality. Today, as we stand together, let us raise our voices, beat our drums, blow our horns and whistles, shout out loud, so that the universal echo of citizens across the world calling for urgent and concrete action on the MDGs cannot be ignored. Let us say to our leaders, we have just 5 years to 2015 and the deadline to realize the Millennium Development Goals. No more talking, time for action. Thank you very much. There's more. Oh my goodness.
It's long.
It goes on. Let the voices of citizens follow them to the summit, saying loudly and clearly, we expect you to deliver concrete plans for action to meet and exceed the Millennium Development Goals. We stand today in solidarity with millions of people all over the world, people who believe in a world where poverty and hunger do not exist anymore, where mothers no longer die in childbirth and women's rights are ensured, where children no longer die in preventable diseases, where every child has the right to quality education and every person has the right to lifelong learning, where the environment is protected and where our leaders make decisions not in their own interests, but in the interests of those who have been marginalized by poverty and exclusion. Today and every day, we will stand up, speak out, and take action for the Millennium Development Goals. The call to our leaders is simple: end poverty and inequality now. Thank you very much.